The experiment. Captain Elias Ward awoke to the sterile scent of chemicals and the cold bite of metal restraints against his wrists. His head pounded. Fluorescent blue light pulsed overhead, casting eerie shadows across the featureless walls of his prison. He tried to move, but his arms and legs were bound to an operating slab, tight enough to cut circulation. He wasn't alone. Across the room, a hunched alien figure examined a holographic projection of what looked like a human genome. Its elongated head pulsed with bioluminescent veins, shifting hues of deep violet. Large, glassy eyes blinked with eerie calculation. This was no soldier, no warrior. This was a scientist. A voice, cold and clinical, echoed through the chamber. Subject is regaining consciousness faster than anticipated. Ward clenched his jaw. He could barely recall what happened before waking up here. One moment, he and his team were aboard the Orion's Wrath, patrolling the asteroid belt near Proxima Centauri. The next, ambushed. The Zelvan, an advanced but reclusive species, had struck fast. And now, he was here. The scientist turned, its thin fingers hovering over a control panel. "We scanned your DNA for weakness," it said, its mouth forming the words with unsettling precision. "A necessary measure before our species commits to open war." Ward spat on the floor, and the alien hesitated. The answer should have been simple. Every species had flaws, biological frailties, genetic defects, weaknesses that could be exploited. The Zelvan expected humans to be no different. Perhaps their immune systems were fragile, or their lifespans short. Maybe they'd find a neurological exploit, a flaw in cognition that made them predictable in war. Instead, they had found something else. This, the scientist gestured at the hovering hologram, a twisting double helix pulsing with golden light. This should not be possible. Ward flexed his fingers, slowly, testing his restraints. "Try me," the alien continued. "Your kind should not be capable of enduring such high stress levels without cellular degradation. Your pain tolerance, your ability to withstand trauma, defies the limitations of most known life forms." It tilted its head. "Your species is redundant. Layers of biological fail-safes ensure survival against extreme damage. And yet, you still evolve." Ward smirked despite himself. "Sounds like bad news for you." The alien's eyes darkened. Indeed, the Zelvan had come searching for humanity's Achilles heel. What they had uncovered was something far worse, an organism that did not simply endure, it adapted. A species that grew stronger the more it was threatened. Ward tugged against his bindings again. Something inside him stirred, a raw, primal instinct. He had been a soldier for years, but this was different. The adrenaline, the focus, the way his body resisted whatever sedatives they'd pumped into him. Maybe the aliens were right. Maybe humans weren't normal. For the first time, the scientist hesitated. For the first time, the Zelvan felt fear. The unkillable species. Dr. Cash had studied over 100 species, dissecting their genetic codes to expose weaknesses. The Zelvan prided themselves on precision. Knowledge was their weapon. But this time, knowledge had turned into horror. The human genome refused to make sense. The specimen, Elias Ward, had already demonstrated unnatural resistance to their sedatives. But as the scans deepened, the results became more disturbing. Dr. Cash examined the holographic projection of Ward's DNA, his elongated fingers twitching involuntarily. "This is impossible," he murmured. His assistants, lesser scientists of the Zelvan Collective, observed in silence. The room was filled with holograms, charts, and simulation projections, each one more troubling than the last. "Explain," one of them finally asked. Dr. Cash gestured at the readings. Every species has limitations coded into their biology. They grow tired. Their cells degenerate. Pain is an evolutionary tool to prevent self-destruction. But humans, his voice wavered. Their bodies fight back. A new projection flickered into view, showing a battle simulation. It depicted a human soldier in combat against a Zelvan warrior. At first, the alien held the advantage. Quicker reflexes, superior strength. But then, as the fight progressed, the human adapted. The simulation showed minor injuries triggering an avalanche of neurological changes, faster reaction time, heightened aggression, increased endurance. The longer the battle lasted, the deadlier the human became. Another assistant whispered, "Pain should weaken them." "It doesn't," Diakash said. "Their bodies react by hardening. Damage causes their nervous system to reinforce itself. They grow stronger when injured." Silence settled over the room. "Continue the analysis," ordered one of the higher-ranking scientists. "We must find an exploit." Diakash hesitated before pulling up another set of data. "There's more." The next projection displayed neural activity. Compared to other species, human brains displayed extreme plasticity. Their learning process was accelerated far beyond expectation. The Zelvan had studied warlike races before, but those species were predictable. Their strategies, their tactics, all followed biological instincts. Humans were different. They adapt too fast, Diakash said, his bioluminescent skin flickering in anxious pulses. Not just physically, but mentally. The longer they are exposed to new information, the faster they process and counter it. A single exposure to unfamiliar weapons, technology, or tactics is enough for them to adjust. Another scientist spoke, their voice hushed. "What does this mean for the war?" Diakash turned to the chamber where Ward was held. The human's breathing had changed, slow and controlled. He had been conscious for some time now, listening, learning. "It means we were wrong," Diakash said finally. "We thought we were studying weaknesses. We were studying weapons." Inside the chamber, Captain Elias Ward opened his eyes. He did not look afraid. He looked ready. The turning point, the restraints shattered. One moment, Elias Ward lay strapped to the examination table, his body seemingly subdued. The next, raw adrenaline surged through his veins. With a deep breath, he twisted, using his body weight to snap the weakened bonds holding his wrists. The metal groaned, then broke. Diakash stumbled backward in shock. Impossible. Ward didn't wait for him to recover. His arms were free. His legs followed a second later. He rolled off the table, muscles tensed, eyes scanning the room. 3 Zelvan guards rushed forward, wielding electric prods. They had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated him. The first guard struck out, aiming for Ward's midsection. He dodged, not with calculated precision, but with instinct. His body had learned their movements from the previous encounters. Neuroplasticity. The alien weapon hummed past him, and in a flash, he grabbed the guard's wrist, twisting. Something popped. The creature shrieked. Ward seized the fallen prod and drove it into the second guard's neck. The alien convulsed and collapsed. The third guard hesitated. Ward didn't. He lunged, striking with brutal efficiency, knocking the last guard unconscious before they could even react. The fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Diakash's hands trembled as he backed toward the control panel. This isn't possible." Ward turned toward him, chest heaving but eyes focused. "You already said that." The scientist's bioluminescent skin pulsed erratically. "We engineered this room to suppress you." "Yeah." Ward rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck. "Guess you should have tried harder." A sudden hiss filled the air as gas vents opened in the ceiling. Ward recognized it immediately, a paralytic agent. His instinct screamed at him to escape, but instead, he focused. His heart pounded. His lungs burned. He had seen what the gas did to other prisoners, muscle failure in under 30 seconds. But Ward had been exposed to it before. His body remembered. Adapt. His breathing slowed. He took shallow inhales, processing the toxin in increments. It wasn't immunity. It was something else. His body was learning how to resist. The gas should have dropped him. It didn't. Ward locked eyes with Diakash. "Open the cells." The scientist's fingers hovered over the panel. His mind raced. How had the human resisted? How had he adapted so quickly? Every second that passed, Ward was evolving. The war projections had warned of this. Humanity didn't just fight. They changed. Ward took a step closer. "Do it." Diakash hesitated. Then his fingers tapped the release code. Alarms blared as cell doors slid open throughout the facility. The experiment was over. Now, it was humanity's turn. The end of Faye. The alarms howled through the facility, but it was already too late. The humans were free. Ward stepped into the corridor, his stolen weapon warm in his grip. Behind him, dozens of newly liberated prisoners emerged, some limping, others bloody, but all with fire in their eyes. They had been tested, tortured, and studied like lab rats. Now, there was something else. They were weapons. Diakash staggered back as Ward approached. The scientist's bioluminescent skin flickered erratically, caught between fear and disbelief. How had this happened? Ward answered his unspoken question. You scanned our DNA looking for weaknesses, he said, voice low, measured. You didn't find any. He glanced down at his own hands, flexing them. You found out what happens when you push humans too far. A group of Zelvan guards rushed into the corridor, plasma rifles raised. Before they could fire, a human prisoner, once frail from captivity, moved with terrifying precision, closing the distance faster than they expected. A stolen rifle barked. One alien fell. Then another. The humans were learning. Diakash's mind raced. Every war model had been wrong. The humans weren't just durable. They weren't just adaptable. They were exponential. Every second of battle made them stronger. They had come into this facility as captives. They were leaving as predators. Call off your forces, Ward said, his weapon now leveled at Diakash's skull. Tell them to stand down. The scientist hesitated. If I do this, my people will never trust me again. Ward's eyes hardened. Your people lost the right to trust the moment they took us. He stepped closer until the muzzle of the gun almost touched the alien's forehead. You want to live? Prove you can adapt. Just like us. Diakash, hands trembling, tapped a series of commands into his console. Across the station, security barriers fell, docking bays unlocked, and the remaining Zelvan troops received a ceasefire order. The battle was over. Ward exhaled slowly. It had been a war fought in the span of minutes. The Zelvan had expected fragile creatures, susceptible to control. Instead, they had unleashed something unstoppable. The scientist's voice was barely a whisper. What are you? Ward considered that for a long moment. Then he smiled, though there was no warmth in it. You will figure it out, he said, if you live long enough. He tapped his communicator. All teams, we're taking the ship. The Zelvan facility belonged to humanity now. And out in the vastness of space, across the war councils of 100 species, a single message would soon spread like wildfire. Never push humans to the brink, because when you do, they don't break. They become something else. Something worse.